It all started almost 2 years ago, thus began my problems, for up to that point my wife Janet and I had enjoyed a seemingly perfectly normal happy married life. This is assuming, of course, that we recognize that a happy marriage is normal. For some time for me this was in question. We had met a few years before. Janet was a friend of Martha's who was at school with my sister Julie. We met at a party in Manchester, where we both lived, and hit it off immediately. We were both good-looking in our own way and seemed quite suited to each other from the start. Janet was sort of slim and shapely at the same time, which might seem like a contradiction, but she managed it, and she was incredibly fit. Her long, lustrous blue-black hair didn't detract from her looks, nor did her sparkling dark blue eyes. I have to admit that I probably had to put a little more effort into getting her to make us a regular couple than she did at first, but once she did, everything was just fine. We were both not virgins when we met, so in the bedroom we both drew on our past experiences and the result was amazing. She did things to me that I could never have imagined, and I decided pretty early on not to ask where she had learned so much, because I was the one getting the benefit, and for my part, to be honest, Janet never asked me any questions. One thing led to another, and it began to seem as if all our friends were getting married. We were all about the same age as everyone else, 20-something to 30-something, and we wanted to settle down. I finally proposed marriage to Janet, and she accepted without hesitation, as I knew she would. We were already more or less living together, so everything was limited to a visit to the local registry office with close relatives and a group of friends, and then a big party in our neighborhood. We didn't even get to consummate the damn marriage that night, as we were stuffed to the brim, but Janet was too drunk to worry about that. But life went on and marriage seemed to make little difference to our daily lives, which consisted of work, parties, feasts and sex, but not necessarily in that order. My recurring problem was that living in Manchester when I was an Arsenal fan wasn't always easy. If it wasn't some bloody United fan, it was someone who was a City fan. Christ, hard to believe, but there were people who went to watch Stockport County every week. Yeah, I know, Bolton Wanderers or even Wigan, but well, crikey. It didn't help that Janet and her whole family were Manchester United fans, and her father only shook his head when we discussed which club our children might root for. So life went on quite happily, and as the years passed, Janet and I grew closer and closer. I was her zing, and she damn sure had me in bed at least 3 times a week. I remember quite clearly at the beginning of the soccer season when I noticed that things were not going the way they should be. I was fine, but Janet seemed a little withdrawn and would sometimes snap at me. I couldn't figure out why exactly, so I wrote it off to the time of the month. Well, that's what we guys do, isn't it, when everything you say is wrong and sex is interrupted for a few days? But her mood seemed to last longer than it should have, and if I hadn't been so busy at work, I might have noticed some warning signs. As it turned out, I had decided to have a serious talk with her that Sunday, but fate had decreed otherwise, and I never got the chance. We went to a party at a local club on the Saturday. My life changed forever. It was an engagement party for someone Janet worked with, but there's no way I can remember who, only that Janet and I were invited. It was overflowing. I had to stand in line for drinks and they weren't even free. Bloody engagement party. No wonder they had it at the club and not at home, the cheeky bastards. I walked back to our table, carefully taking a couple beers for myself and Todd, Martha's husband, and a G&T for our wives. Where are the girls? I asked Todd, not seeing any of them. Gone dancing with their old friends, he answered carelessly. He didn't care, so why should I care? We chatted, oblivious to the noise around us, invariably discussing the scores of the big matches from the day before. Both Arsenal and United had won, so it wasn't controversial, and I hardly noticed the time passing. Hey, guys, Martha greeted, returning to the table. Is that my drink? Yeah, I replied, interrupting my diatribe about the problems with the 4-4-2 formation. Where's Janet? Oh, still dancing out there somewhere, Martha replied and quickly changed the topic of conversation. It's too fast. Who are you dancing with? I asked, drawing attention to myself. She's been dancing for a while now. Just an old friend of Mike's, Martha replied. Nothing to get upset about. Who's upset? I asked. Why should I be upset? No reason at all, Mike. No reason at all. It's just an old friend Janet hasn't seen in a long time. Maybe that should have been a wake-up call. It was hard to do, but I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of beer, trying to pretend it didn't bother me, even though I was already seething inside. Another 10 minutes and at least 2 more changes of music, and my nerves began to rise. Martha whispered something to Todd at least twice, and the two of them carefully avoided my gaze, almost pretending I wasn't there.
Come on, you two, I finally asked in desperation. What the hell is going on here?
Who is this friend of hers? Maybe you'd better go and find her, Mike, Todd ventured, ignoring the dirty looks Martha was throwing at him.
No!
She shouted, jumping to her feet and shoving my half-empty pint into my hands.
You don't have to, Mike. I'll go and find it for you.
Ah! Something is going on here, and I asked, no, I demanded of Todd what the hell the girls were up to. Oh, just some soccer player they used to know, he informed me not too confidently. I think he played for United as a junior but didn't make it to the level and is now somewhere up north playing in one of the lower divisions.
Did they both know him? I asked, getting up and deciding to go and see what the hell was going on.
I think your Janet knew him better than Martha did, Mike, Todd admitted cautiously, taking hold of my hand.
Don't do anything foolish, Mike. I'm sure Janet isn't doing anything she shouldn't be doing.
Well, I'll go see Todd myself, I growled, shaking off his hand and wondering if the damn soccer player had anything to do with the jovial mood Janet had been in lately.
But I didn't go far. Not far at all.
There she is, Mike, Martha announced, panting, striding toward us and dragging Janet behind her.
That's all right.
For a few moments Janet and I stared at each other in complete silence. Even the noise in the room around us seemed to subside. She just stood there, making no attempt to sit down or offer any apology or explanation.
Who is he? I demanded at last. Where did that bastard come from?
What's it to you? Snapped Janet. What right do you have to dictate who I spend my time with? I'm your damn husband, I reminded her, raising my voice.
And you better remember that.
Husband? She hissed.
Husband? You're the one who should have remembered that I'm your wife.
What are you talking about, Janet?
What's gotten into you?
I was already yelling and didn't understand what she was getting at, and the people around us were starting to notice the commotion. You weren't thinking about your wife when you were with that slut Jennifer Meadows, were you? Shouted Janet back at me. I opened my mouth to answer, but my mind wandered.
What the hell did she know about Jennifer and me?
You see, continued Janet accusingly.
You don't even deny it, you bastard.
Janet, dear, I began to reply.
Jennifer and I were.
Before I could finish, my wife interrupted me.
You fucked that whore, didn't you? Janet accused me. You went to bed with her.
Yes, sweetheart, I replied almost machine-like, startled by the ferocity of her attack.
But? No buts, you cheating bastard, Janet interrupted.
I know what you've been doing to that cow, and I won't stand for it.
But, honey, it's not what you think.
Oh, shit.
Oh, my God, Moses.
Of all the stupid things you could say, why did I say that one? Well, go to hell, you rotten bastard, Janet shouted for all around to hear. We're done, and now you can go fuck bleeding Jennifer Meadows whenever you want. Listen, Janet, I began, pitching forward to enclose Janet in a hug.
Jennifer and I were.
My speech was suddenly interrupted by Janet, who grabbed a glass of beer from the table and threw it at me. I was too close to try to dodge, and the glass hit me in the temple, causing me to freeze in shock.
Fuck you!
My wife shouted and rushed away, followed by Martha, who urged her to stop.
Jesus, Mike, Todd said, getting up and wiping the beer off me.
Jennifer Meadows and you, she's fucking gorgeous, but have you seen her husband? I know her goddamn husband, Todd, I told him, wiping myself. And he already knows about me and my wife. A surprised look appeared on Todd's face, but I didn't have time to explain, because there was a catfight going on across the room, women screaming and yelling. There were tables and chairs lying everywhere and it was a real old mess. In other circumstances I might have been concerned or even amused, but in the state I was in, I just stood there and watched.
Jesus, Mike, Todd interjected.
That's your Janet fighting with some blonde. This is Jennifer Meadows.
Christ, it is, Mike, Todd muttered. Looks like it's all over now.
Oh, shit.
What the hell? How in God's name did a couple nights in bed with Jennifer get to this point? What's the bloody game, Mike? Even though I had my head in my hands, I could make out the harsh words of another very upset woman yelling at me. At that moment, I wanted only one thing: to leave. But life, at least mine, has never been so simple. Hi Jennifer, how are you? I couldn't think of anything else to say, that was the state I was in.
How am I? The beautiful Jennifer Meadows shouted back at me, while her huge husband Fred stood behind her back and glared.
What did you say to that stupid cow, Janet?
Nothing, I stated, keeping my eyes on Fred. I tried to explain, but... She claimed Mike and I were having an affair, Jennifer interjected.
Said you admitted it to her?
I gasped. Fred, the big guy, looked somewhat in pain, and it wasn't good. What's this all about, Mike? Demanded Jennifer. She didn't give me a chance to explain. Jennifer, I managed to put in when she gave me time to speak. She asked me if we were in bed together, and I kind of admitted that we were before I had time to think about it.
But that was a hell of a long time ago, Mike, Jennifer exploded.
We were dating before I met Fred and you got together with Janet.
I know, I muttered. But she didn't give me a chance to explain it.
I looked up at Fred, and he smiled at me.
Well, kind of smiled.
I thanked my lucky stars that he already knew that Jennifer and I had been dating for months before he came on the scene.
He was freaking big like Fred.
What a silly cow that Janet is, Jennifer remarked, and then let out a squeal.
What's the matter?
I asked, looking around, expecting to see my angry wife looming over us with a broom or something. Your face, Mike, she exclaimed, noticing the beer still dripping off me. Janet knocked over a glass of Jennifer's beer on me, I explained, trying to smile like it didn't matter.
But where did all that blood come from?
Blood? Oh my God, what blood? The cold liquid that used to run down my face now felt warm to the touch. Blood was everywhere, dripping even onto the table and right into my beer.
What a bloody waste!
Everyone started fussing around me, women leaning forward and wiping my face with tissues and other objects. The glass must have shattered when it hit me.
Gordon Bennett.
What an awful bugger. 20 minutes later, I was already in the emergency room of the local hospital, where some dragon dressed in a nurse's uniform had checked me in.
You fought?
She accused me with an expression of disgust. Not surprising, looking at the plethora of sundries and jetsam scattered around me in the emergency room.
Well. After all, it was Saturday night.
No, I replied.
My wife did it.
I guess you deserve it, she commented curtly and moved on to the next poor guy.
So much for the bloody National Health Service.
But in all seriousness, I was dealt with, got a few stitches, and a couple hours later Fred, more than anyone else, walked me out to his car and drove me home. Home, that is, to a cold empty place.
There's no sign of Janet. God, what a bloody mess.
I tried to call her cell phone, but to no avail as I only got an answer message.
Sorry, Janet Morris is not available. And so on and so forth.
It felt pretty damn good, and you can imagine how pissed off I was. I went to bed, but I leave you to guess how much sleep I actually got that night.
What's left of him? Morning sunshine shower, tea and breakfast.
Well, not too much of a breakfast, as I could hardly keep from eating it. Then the buzzing of my cell phone sounded and I tiredly walked over to where I had left it the night before, not looking forward to the conversation I knew was coming.
It was actually a text message, and you can guess who it was from. You are a cheating bastard, F off. That was great, wasn't it? Where are you? I wrote back.
I'll get my revenge came to mind, and I felt the remnants of my breakfast coming back.
I was desperately trying to get on the phone to talk to her. To try to prevent Janet from making a terrible mistake.
But again I got the answering machine message, even though I knew she must have her phone with her. I realized that it was 9:30 in the morning, and that my beloved wife had been gone all night. I realized with sickening horror that it was probably too late to prevent what I feared, and images of my Janet, even at this very moment naked under some damn idiot soccer player from the 2nd Division, swam before my eyes.
Oh, no!
Despite myself, I couldn't stop the remnants of breakfast from making another attempt to break free, and this time I just left it alone. The result was a bloody mess all over the carpet that took me hours to clean up. I was at a loss as to what to do. I called Martha's cell phone but got no answer, and when I tried the landline, I breathed a sigh of relief when Fred answered. "What's up, Mike?" he asked. "Bloody awful," I replied and told him about the text messages. Martha went to try to talk some sense into Mike, Fred continued. She talked to her on the phone, and they got right into a fight. "Where is she, Fred?" I asked quietly. "Where did Janet spend the night?" "I don't have to tell you, Mike," he replied grudgingly. "I promised Martha." "That more or less tells you where she spent the night, Fred, doesn't it?" asked I. "I think so, Mike," he confirmed. "But that doesn't mean she slept with him or anything." "Who is this guy, Fred?" I asked, ignoring his last comment as unlikely. "What's his name?" "I don't know him, Mike," Fred said, perhaps thinking he was on safer ground. "His name is Nick Masters or something like that, and he was moved into the closed season a few weeks ago. He's playing for Stockport this year." "Stockport? Stockport? I have nothing against Stockport, but damn." Anyway, the name Nick was all I needed to know. I'd never met the guy, and Janet had never mentioned him. But her mom? Oh, yeah. Yeah, she'd bought that name a few times in the early days of our acquaintance before she realized her daughter was serious with me. Heck, she'd even called me Nick by mistake a couple times, but I'd laughed about it then. Suddenly everything fell into place. Apparently, he had been back in the neighborhood for weeks by then. Just as Janet was drifting away from me. Just as the sex was winding down. I could hardly believe that my Janet could cheat on me, but all the evidence pointed to it. What am I supposed to do? What can I do? The obvious one, of course, a damn cheating cow. I jumped up and raced up the stairs, bursting into our bedroom like a man possessed. I grabbed the first suitcase I could find from the closet, opened the first of Janet's drawers, and began shoving handfuls of blouses and clothes into them. I'd show her. I tossed the drawer aside in fury and opened the next one, taking a handful of clothes from there. Underwear. Tight bras and tiny panties. They're all sexy. Honestly, there was nothing I could do about it. I stopped and stared at them, remembering how gorgeous Janet looked in them. I remembered how she liked to tease me by strutting around the house in a sexy bra, panties, and high-heel shoes. Remembering how just a few months ago she had opened the door for me when I came home from work in the evening, clad only in the same meager bits of nothingness I clutched in my fist at that very moment. It was then that the first tear blurred my vision, and although I spent the next few moments wiping it away, it just didn't seem to want to go away. They say it's only when you lose something that you realize how important it is, don't they? At that crucial moment, I realized how much I loved Janet and how much I would miss her if she left me. Or I'd kick her out of the house, which was what I seemed to want. She cheated on me, and I had to be realistic about it. But who made her think I was cheating on her? Who made her think I was having an affair with Jennifer Meadows? If I had known. Does it make any difference? Well, if you're grasping at straws, you can. I dejectedly dropped the laundry into the drawer, sank down on the bed and let the tears flow, and I began to realize what the depths of despair really were, that my former happy existence had been shattered. I was still sitting there a while later, probably a few hours later, when the phone rang again. Yes, it had rang several times already, but I decided to ignore it. "Hi," I replied without much enthusiasm. "Hey, Mike. It's me, honey," I heard from the other end of the line. "I've been trying to reach you, honey." I wasn't with Janet, I lied, not wanting to admit that I'd sat there half the day crying my eyes out. "I guess I made a terrible mistake, Mike," Janet muttered into the phone. "Martha told me about what happened afterwards, and I even talked to Jennifer and apologized." "Now what?" I challenged her. "Where were we, Janet?" "I hope that. Oh my God, Mike, I assume you know about Nick? The fact that he plays soccer for bloody Stockport, you mean, or the fact that you spent the night in bed with him?" A long silence hung on the line.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mike, she finally continued. I love you, honey, and I hate myself for hurting you so much. I was a real bitch. So you fucked him? I accused her. I don't want to talk about it over the phone, honey, Janet whispered, clearly close to tears. Can I come to you? Not right now, Janet, I replied, remembering the pile of sick on the living room floor. Give me an hour or so. Okay, honey, she replied, and this time I heard sobs. I'll be there tonight around 8. God, what a horrible job. Have you ever cleaned a carpet of vomit? No? I don't advise you to try it then, and I had to make 2 hasty visits to the toilet before I got it looking and, more importantly, smelling properly, and then I had to do the same job to myself. I wasn't looking forward to our meeting at all and still hadn't decided how to spend it. Yeah, sure. Of course I wanted my wife back, but I needed to know who had put all that nonsense into her head, and someone had to pay for it. But even then, it wasn't that simple. If Janet really did make one single mistake and it was just one slip up, I thought I could forgive her. Yes, it happens, and I wanted to win her back enough to turn the other cheek. But she's been messing around with me for 2 weeks or more. Was she seeing this Nick guy behind my back for 2 weeks? Was she having sex with him all that time behind my back? I had no idea, and there was no point in speculating. I just prayed that by this night things would be good between us again. 8 hours came and went, and I was on the cusp of death. The phone rang. It's that damn phone again. Hi Mike, this is Martha, I greeted. Hi Martha, I'm just waiting for Janet to show up, I replied. Thank you, I take it you've explained everything to her. I'm afraid Janet won't be in today, Mike, Martha informed me without any preamble. I've been on the phone with her for the last hour, and she's in a terrible state. Why? I demanded, even though the question was stupid. She's just so confused, Mike. She can't believe what she did to you, and she's not sure if you'll take her back. She's very confused and very upset. Well, to be honest, she probably deserves it, I continued. But I don't want to lose her, Martha. I love her very much. I know you are, Mike, Martha comforted me. I'm sure you'll both work things out for the best. Janet said to tell you that she's coming over to talk to you tomorrow after work. Her mom's bringing her. Old dragon, I thought, but I didn't speak out loud, just thanked Martha for letting me know. I assume Janet will be spending the night at her parents' house? I asked, crossing my arms over my chest, wanting support. I think so, Mike. That was all I got in response. I was left feeling empty inside, and I picked up the phone at least 4 times to call her parents' house, but each time I put it back down, so confused was I. What if she refuses to talk to me? Even worse, what if she wasn't actually there? Oh, shit. I told myself that the next day would be fine, and eventually made it to bed, and the bottle and a half of wine I drank at least helped me fall into a restless sleep. Forget about the next day at work. Better yet, just forget about everything. I didn't get fired or anything, but the boss certainly wasn't very happy with me. Go home, Mike, he admonished me mid-afternoon. You're of no use here. I think he realized that I was having some family issues, and I remember him going through some tough months last year. Whatever the problem is, Mike, deal with it. Don't do anything in haste and regret it for the rest of your life. So, I went home and immediately wished I had gone back to work where at least I had something to occupy my thoughts. The call from Martha, when it came, was a pleasant distraction, and she wished me luck, too. She told me to keep my head down and give Janet time to explain. Everyone else seemed to want my marriage to continue, and Janet didn't seem to mind either. Everything seemed to be up to me, so I decided to try to forgive and forget. Forget? Well, it wouldn't be that easy, but I felt that forgiveness was possible. No, not easy, that's not the right word, but Janet was my life. Heck, we'd even talked about wanting a baby a few weeks before, hadn't we? We weren't sure about this for a while, but... Well, but. My heart jumped when I heard the car pull up, and I couldn't resist looking out the window to see Janet and her damn mother getting out of the car. They were looking back at the house nervously,
and I'm pretty sure Janet muttered something angrily to the old dragon. I hoped Janet wouldn't ring the bell or something stupid, but sure enough, a few minutes later they came in and saw me standing there waiting for them. "Hi, Mike," Janet said cautiously. "Are you okay, honey?" When I didn't say anything, just shrugged and nodded my head in agreement, Janet's face broke into a smile, and she rushed over to me and hugged me, pulling me tight against her. "Oh, I'm so damn sorry, Mike." "I'm really sorry," she sobbed. "I was so stupid and listened to what other people told me." "It's okay, sweetheart," I replied, wrapping my arms around her and letting the healing process begin, even though I knew it would be difficult. "Could you leave us alone for a while?" I turned to her mother, who was still standing there frowning. "I think Janet and I need some alone time. I think I'd better stay and just..." She started to object, but Janet interrupted her. "Please, Mom, don't be awkward. Mike is having a hard time, and I'd rather you weren't here either." Her mother grimaced, turned reluctantly, and left the room. I was a little puzzled as to why she still thought it was my fault, since that was how she felt about me. Our conversation began, and the beginning, at least, was what I expected. "I can't apologize to Mike for hurting you, honey," Janet began. "I should have talked to you about it before I did something so stupid in public." "Who fed you those lies, Janet?" I asked, but she refused to speak, though I noticed her cast a glance toward the door where her mother had gone, but then caught herself and looked at me again. "So that's it, huh? Cow, bitch. Why the hell did her mother hate me so much?" I figured it wouldn't end there, but the moment of reconciliation didn't seem to be right. "I'm not gonna rush into tea. I'll figure it out, and that troublesome cow will pay. Can you forgive me, honey?" Janet pleaded, looking at me with tears in her eyes. "I need to know that I have to forgive Janet," I replied. "You slept with him, didn't you?" "Yes, Mike," she whispered softly into my chest. "And I suspect that night might not have been the first night either?" "No, Mike," Janet blurted out. "I swear to you that last night was the first time. At least, it was the first time since I was his girlfriend years ago." "But you dated him, didn't you?" I accused her. "Yeah," she admitted modestly. "I've met him a few times at lunch and a couple times after work." "And had sex, I suppose," I frowned. "No, I told you, Mike," Janet pleaded. "Honestly, we didn't. I let him kiss me and a few other things, that's all." "But why Janet?" I asked back, on the verge of tears myself. "I have to get to know Janet to get over it. What's wrong with me, honey? Don't you love me?" "Of course I love you, Mike," she exclaimed in despair. "But that's the problem, don't you see?" "What do you see?" replied I. "You love me, so why do you need another man?" Janet hesitated, then lost all hope in me. "I love Nick too, Mike. Don't you realize that? I never stopped loving him and I should have gone up north with him when he proposed to me a few years ago. Only my mom stopped me then, and I never looked at another man seriously until I met you." What the hell are you telling me?" I screamed, pushing her away, my brain unable to comprehend what she was telling me. "I'm sorry, Mike, but you had to find out sooner or later, honey," she sobbed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I love you, honey, but I also love Nick and always have. Nick is Nick and we were always meant to be together." "What are you telling me?" I gasped, not believing my ears, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm so sorry, honey," Janet cried, flooding with tears. "I'm not coming home, baby. I can't. I have to try to make things right with Nick now that he's back. It was supposed to happen that way." I stood in a trance, unable to speak and most likely on the verge of a heart attack. I couldn't believe it. I searched my heart for the strength to forgive my wife, and all the while my dear Janet was planning to leave me for another man. At that moment, the door swung open and a dragon flew in. "Haven't you caused enough trouble already?" she yelled at me. "I hope you're pleased with yourself now you brought my daughter to tears." "Mommy," Janet sobbed. "Please don't get involved. None of this would have happened if he hadn't shown up," the dragon continued nonchalantly.
You took her away from me and from Nick.
Mom, shut up, for heaven's sake, Janet shouted at her.
Even better, I interjected, coming to my senses a little. You can get out of my house, you old cow.
You can't talk to me like that, the old cow hissed back at me, but I took her by the arm and led her forcibly, frog-like, to the front door, where I pushed her outside and slammed the door in her face.
Sorry about Mom, Janet said dejectedly. I'm sorry for everything, Mike.
I think you'd better leave too, Janet, I informed my so-called wife sternly.
Nick will miss you.
But we need to settle things with Mike, Janet objected.
I can't just walk away and leave you like this.
You've already gone and left me once before, Janet, I remarked angrily.
I don't need your damn sympathy.
But I want to help you, Mike, she whispered.
I want to try to make you understand.
I don't need your damn help, Janet, I hissed back at her. And I'm well aware that you cheated on me and now you're leaving me for some other poor bastard. Please, Mike, she sobbed softly.
Please let me. No, Janet.
I shouted back at her, at the limit of my strength.
Please, if you want to do something for me, just go away.
Janet burst into tears again and sobbed, cradling herself in her arms.
Can you ever forgive me, Mike? She finally asked between sobs. Can you ever forgive me for what I did to you?
Yeah, you're forgiven, bitch, if that's what you want, I lied to her through gritted teeth.
Now get out of my house and let me move on with my life if I can at all.
Janet took a step toward me, offering her face in a familiar manner for perhaps one last kiss, but I stepped back and raised my hand to stop her.
I can forgive you, Janet, I cried in anguish. But not enough to let you touch me again.
Janet visibly crumpled even more, slowly turned and walked out of the house, her screams still audible as she disappeared from my life forever.
That's what I thought at the time.
I don't remember anything about the next few days as I sank into a bottomless pit of depression. I went from a happily married man thinking of starting a family to a neglected wretch in just a couple of days.
It was too much and I turned to alcohol as my salvation, but of course that's not the answer, is it?
I wouldn't want to dwell too much on that sad week, but with the help of a few friends I managed to pull through. Even my boss took it in stride, but then again, I was very good at my job, so I guess he was paying him to do it.
See what was happening to me? No wonder I was becoming cynical.
Our friends seemed to be split in half. Although most of them had known Janet much longer than I had, many of them supported me. They never called her by name in my presence, except casually, on occasion. Some horrible ache inside me wanted to know more about Nick, but I couldn't bring myself to ask any of them for any information. I even went to watch the bloody Stockport game one night and saw the bastard come on as a second-half substitute and score a goal, forcing a draw. I still didn't know much about him but had to admit he was a pretty good footballer. I wondered if Janet was in the audience that night, and I surveyed the box to see her. But no sign of her.
Maybe she was too far away. I left the court that night feeling so miserable I couldn't hope to describe it. The bastard had beaten me, and all I could do was see images of a happy Janet throwing herself into his arms after his success on the field. I doubt she ever thought of poor me. There was no way I was going to decide to date or anything like that, and of course it would have to be a long time before I felt okay to start that part of my life over again. I haven't thought about divorce, nor have I seen the point of it. If she wants to marry the prick, let her do the work and he'll pay for it. He was certainly earning enough as a professional soccer player, even if it was just Stockport. Life went on. About 3 weeks after our separation, around 9 o'clock in the evening, my miserable evening was interrupted by a knock on the door. Answering the phone, I was surprised to see Janet standing there. "What do you want?" I asked in an unfriendly tone. "Can I come in, please, Mike?" she asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside and followed her into the living room, my mind a mess. Janet was the last person I expected to see. Damn it, why did she have to look so damn gorgeous? "So what do you want?" I repeated sternly, noticing how unhappy Janet looked. Maybe he kicked her out or something. Maybe that's too much to hope for? Did I really want this to happen? "Can I have a cup of tea, please, love?" asked Janet quietly. "Are you sure you'll stay that long, Janet?" I answered her. Won't Nick miss you?
And I'm not your sweetheart anymore, in case you haven't forgotten. Please, Mike, don't be horrible to me, she whimpered, clenching her hands into fists.
Nick doesn't know I'm here, but there's something we need to talk about.
I have nothing to talk to you about, Janet, I told her, and my heart skipped a beat. Please, Mike, don't be difficult.
We really need to talk. Reluctantly, I went to the kitchen and made 2 mugs of tea.
It seemed like old times, but of course it was nothing like that. I stood waiting for the kettle to boil, wondering what the hell Janet wanted me to do this time.
Divorce can be? Is this really the moment? So what do we need to talk to Janet about?
I demanded, handing her a mug of tea.
I don't think we have many questions left. I'm pregnant, Mike.
She babbled and dropped her head in her hands.
That was pretty damn fast, I replied.
You've only been fucking him for a few weeks.
It's not Nick's kid, Mike.
What?
It's not Mike Nika.
But.
I don't get it. Mike is almost 3 months old now, Janet continued almost inaudibly. It can't be Nick, since he's only been back a couple months.
He has to be yours. You're the father of my baby, Mike.
Oh, for crying out loud. What did I do to deserve this? Let's be honest. You wouldn't want to be in my shoes at that moment, would you?
What would you do? The woman I hated, yet loved, was pregnant with my child.
Make no mistake. It was my baby. Did I tell her to fuck off, as I was inclined to do, or did I react differently, as I really wanted to? I was totally confused.
To begin with, we both just stood there looking at each other. I was wondering what to say, and Janet was wondering what my reaction would be.
Well, ask Janet.
I don't know what to say, I replied.
Are you happy?
She asked uncertainly.
Should I? Objected I. We were planning on having Mike's family, she continued cautiously. Before? Well, you know. Before it happened. But what do we do about Janet now? I asked, obvious question.
It's up to you, Mike, Janet said with difficulty.
Whether you bring me back or not. And Nick, your boyfriend. What about him?
I demanded, feeling my jowls rise on her cheek.
How does he feel about all this? He doesn't like Mike's kids.
He's made that clear, especially to strangers.
Does he even know about the baby?
I asked, wondering if he'd already kicked her out.
Does anyone else know?
No, Mike, she answered incredibly hone.
STLY.
I thought I'd tell you first. I haven't changed my feelings for Nick one bit during my absence, Mike.
But I've really missed you a lot. Not a day went by that I didn't think about you.
But he's still the first choice?
Maybe.
But you and the baby together will make all the difference.
I'll give it up if I have to.
We sat there and just looked at each other. I knew things would never be the same again, but maybe things would at least be okay.
And the baby?
That was the deciding factor. I just couldn't throw away my own unborn child.
Okay, Janet, I agreed.
You can move back in if you want, but not into my bedroom. Until further notice, you'll sleep in the spare bedroom and we'll see what happens.
Oh, thank you, Mike, darling, Janet purred, jumping to her feet and rushing over to me. I knew you wouldn't let me down.
You'll see, everything will work out for the best. I turned my face to offer her my cheek when she tried to kiss me, which surprised her, but she ended up in my lap anyway, wrapping her arms around my neck. I wanted to push her away, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It just felt so good to have her near me again. I'll move in with you next week, if that's okay with you, Mike, Janet purred, but was she in for a surprise? You move now, this very moment, or not at all, I subliminally informed her. There's no way I'm sitting at home for a week waiting for you while you're with him. But what about Nick, she muttered. I have to explain to him, Mike. I can't just leave him. Like you me, then, I snapped at her, but she only lowered her gaze. These are my terms, Janet.
You move here immediately. You won't see him. You won't call him.
You don't tell him you're pregnant, and you don't tell anyone at all that you're pregnant until we stop hiding it.
But Mike, I can't do that. What will Nick think? If I'm lucky, I answered her. He'll think what I want him to think. What everyone will think. He'll think you left him to come back to me.
But it will crucify him, Mike.
It'll break his heart. Yeah, if you're lucky, I almost smirked.
Maybe he'll realize how I felt when he took you away from me. Please, Mike, she begged me.
Don't make me do this. If you really still love me, then don't make me.
If you love me the way you say you do, Janet, and if you plan to spend the rest of your life with me, I don't think I'm asking for much, I explained. But it's still your choice.
You've changed, Mike, Janet remarked grudgingly.
You changed me, Janet, I remarked.
So maybe you can change me back?
I made Janet send Nick an email telling him that she was leaving him to come back to me and that she didn't want to see him anymore. It wasn't as short and impersonal as the text messages I was getting, but it was enough.
I didn't let her call him to say anything.
I insisted that she never, ever contact him again and that if she even saw him on the street, she had to leave or our relationship would be over. Let the bastard suffer. By the way, I also told her that her mother was no longer welcome in our home, and she didn't seem to mind that.
Oddly enough, things made sense from the start.
I tried to tell Janet that I wouldn't check up on her and that I trusted her to honor our arrangement, and I think that helped. Sure, I didn't really trust her, but what was the use of making a fuss about it? About a week later, she told me that Nick had called her at work many times, and she refused to take his calls. He finally tricked her that day by impersonating someone else and got through to her. She admitted to talking to him for a few minutes, but stuck to our story and said nothing about the baby.
I just nodded in approval. I hoped the bastard was suffering as much as I was. Janet moved into the spare room as agreed, but otherwise we led a normal life like any other normal couple. Everyone assumed, as I wanted them to, that Janet had come back to me and that I had forgiven her. Our friends got over it and, with the exception of a few people, were glad we had solved our problems. After a while Janet joined me on the couch, took my hand and placed it on her stomach. Can you feel her moving?
She asked, her deep blue eyes blazing with happiness. I couldn't say it was probably our first intimate moment, and I left my hand there longer than I should have. Later, when we turned on the TV, Janet sat down next to me again and snuggled up to me. When I didn't reject her, she snuggled even closer to me, and we spent the next couple hours cuddled on the couch like a normal happy couple. When it was time to go to bed, she took my hand and we walked hand in hand upstairs without saying a word. After passing the spare bedroom, we walked naturally into mine, where we helped each other undress. The slightest hint of a bump was visible, and Janet looked so healthy and beautiful. We got into bed together and pressed closely together, enjoying the warm closeness of each other's bodies. No. We didn't make love that night, but we spent the whole night in each other's arms. We didn't even kiss until the morning, when I woke up happy that my wife was back with me where she belonged. We didn't make love for another 2 nights, but from then on the spare room became redundant. It was meant to be, as the baby was about to be born and at some stage she would want to occupy the room herself. Life was good again, and our problems seemed like just a memory. Not distant, not even painful, but one that we could live with. Then little Mary came into the world at 5:35, one cold January morning, and life seemed better than I had ever dreamed. I even agreed to share a room with my mother-in-law as long as that room wasn't in our house. Nick was never mentioned, and if Janet was still thinking about him, I didn't know it. My doubts diminished and almost disappeared, and when we celebrated Mary's first birthday at our house, I even allowed the dragon to be present. I wasn't going to say much to her, but... well, you know. Yes, I know, but life has been so good, and it's all been made possible by our adorable little Mary. I wish Nick could be here, I heard the old dragon say to Janet as I returned to the kitchen with the dirty glasses in frozen place. We don't talk about Nick in this house, Mom, I replied happily to my loving wife. Mike would be very upset. To hell with him, Janet, her mother replied. He's a Southerner, and you know I never liked him. Keep your voice down, Mother, Janet admonished her mother.
Okay, Janet, but what did Nick think of the baby when he saw how beautiful she was? Oh, shit, what was that I heard? The smile disappeared from my face. It wasn't your best idea, Mom, Janet continued. He just doesn't like kids, and nothing would have come of it. Anyway, Mike is a wonderful father, and I love him. But you can't keep dating Nick behind Mike's back, honey, Dragon said. You have to decide between the two of them. I wouldn't have had to if you hadn't interfered again, Mom, said the wife angrily. You knew exactly what was going to happen when you tricked me into seeing Nick again, and I behaved so well, forgetting about him. He's just not right for you, that Mike, honey, the dragon bitch insisted. If I wanted to. If you were right, you damn cow, I interrupted, barging in on them. Janet and I would never have gotten married. Oh my God, Mike, Janet cried out. How long have you been? Oh my God, you heard everything, didn't you? I didn't even dignify her with an answer. I simply grabbed my mother-in-law by the collar and roughly dragged her out of the kitchen, through the group of astonished friends and family gathered there, and threw her out the front door for the second time in our lives. Without stopping to check if she was okay or not, I stormed back into our living room to confront the gathered crowd. Sorry guys, but the party's over, I announced loudly. I suggest you all get out right now and take my cheating wife with you before I do something I'll regret later. Some took the hint and some stood stunned by this turn of events. I think you'd all better leave, Janet said. Mike and I need some alone time. No way, bitch, I shouted at her, grabbing the dress that was half torn on her. You'll be the first to leave. The turmoil you can imagine, can't you? Several guys grabbed me to hold me down, and at least one of them tried to throw a punch at me. Fred, as usual, dealt with it and escorted me out of the room before it all turned into an unpleasant story. Thinking back on it, I can really thank him for a lot of things. After a while he led me back to the living room where Fred and Martha were waiting for me, and everyone else had left. Except, of course, for Janet, who collapsed in her chair with an unhappy look. Happy now, bitch? I shouted at her. Calm down, Mike, Fred said, putting his huge arm around me, I assumed to comfort and contain me. Give Janet a chance to explain, please, Mike, Martha interjected. Maybe it's not as bad as you think. Just as bad? I gasped. It's a hell of a lot worse than bad. He's right, Martha, Janet interjected. I've been a fool again, a bloody fool. That's it, damn it, I shouted at her. What do you have to say for yourself? Just forgive me, Mike, she cried. I won't even ask you to forgive me, because I know you won't. But Janet, declared Martha, but was interrupted. This isn't good, Martha. I've let Mike down again, and he knows it. I have no right to even ask him for understanding. I think you'd better leave, Janet, I told her angrily. You're not welcome here anymore. What about Mary? She pleaded. She's staying with me, I insisted. But I'm her mother, Mike. Should have thought of that earlier, I remarked. Where the hell are you going to take her? Your fancy man won't have her, and if you take her to your bitch of a mother, I'll burn her goddamn house down. He's right, Janet, Martha agreed with me. Stay with us tonight, and tomorrow we'll sort it out. I'm so sorry, Mike. Oh God, I'm so sorry, Janet sobbed, looking back at me as Martha and Fred led her out. I went out with him a couple times, that's all, and I swear I didn't sleep with him. Yeah, I'm sure you are, I spat after her, slamming the door behind the three of them. If it hadn't been for little Mary, I'd have been paralyzed drunk that night. My God, a man can only take so much. But I had responsibilities by then, didn't I? Things have changed. I had a few drinks, but then went to bed, moving the crib with little Mary into my room, where we slept next to each other. She was totally unaware of the changes that were to take place in her young life. And I? Well, the fewer words the better. Oh God, again I was screwed, but this time it was different, and if I had to fight, there was no way I was going to give up my Mary without a fight, and somehow I didn't think I would have to do that. As it turned out, I didn't go for a divorce, leaving it up to her if she needed it. Instead I went for an official separation,
which was cheaper and much quicker anyway. My main reason was to establish custody of little Mary, and after listening to all the circumstances and the fact that Janet had no objection, the judge had no problem granting me what I wanted. "Hey, Mike." "Oh, hi Carol," I replied, turning around, unable to avoid a quick scan with my gaze of the beautiful woman in front of me, and especially her lovely slender body. "How's little Tim doing?" "He's perfectly fine this morning," the adorable young mom sitting in front of me told me with a smile. "He's already gotten over his cold." "How's Mary?" "Gorgeous as always," I grinned, looking back at my infant daughter. But then again, I suppose I could be biased. "Oh, I don't think so," Carol added, lowering her delicious, jean-clad ass next to me. "But she's very lucky to have a father like you after what her mother did." "You've already heard about it, haven't you?" "Yes, indeed, this is where we came in." "So where did we go? What happened next?" "Read on, please read on." I have to say that Carol was an amazing piece of breadcrumbs. Sure, she was a few years younger than me, but that didn't mean I couldn't look at her. With her gorgeous reddish-brown hair and near-perfect slim figure, she was everything a guy could dream of. But she was too young for me. 12 years between us seemed like too much distance to bridge. Life as a working single father was pleasant but not easy. It seemed like all I did was work and look after Mary, but at the time that was all I wanted to do. However, I discovered the local park and all the lovely young moms who frequented it, and after a few explanations as to why I was here, they all accepted me without question. They were great. Well, most of them were, but since I wasn't in pull mode, it didn't matter and I enjoyed just looking and chatting. Okay, I confess I looked at Carol a little more than the others. I met her in the park while I was walking Mary and she was walking little Tim. He was a lanky boy, and we hit it off right away. He giggled, and I couldn't hide a smile of pleasure. Mary's husband had gone to the Middle East on security business and soon returned in a body bag. The company hadn't exactly abandoned her, but their generosity was limited and about to run out. She needed a house that wasn't too expensive, and it suddenly occurred to me that I needed a live-in nanny for Mary. QED. Sorry, it's Latin, I think, and I'm not sure exactly what it means, but having been an engineer/mathematician most of my life, I used the term a lot. It sort of means that one arrived at a solution without much trouble. Something obvious. Voila! Sorry, that's French. Accordingly, Carol moved in with us and looked after the two children while I went to work to earn money. Hey, presto. Is that really Italian? These things have a way of working out, and although I wasn't in a relationship with a girl at the time, we were very good together. Life was good, the kids were happy, and so were Carol and me. I was really starting to come to terms with Janet. One evening I was sitting on the couch while Carol cleaned up the delicious dinner we had just eaten. My daughter Mary climbed on top of me and snuggled in, yawning and clearly not going to sleep. Tim then decided that my lap looked comfortable, moved over to me and settled right on top of me. Curled up in a ball, young Tim made himself comfortable and quickly fell asleep on my lap. Truth be told, it was one of those magical moments, and I didn't fail to follow them into the land of doing. Is there room for me in there? Giggled Carol, walking back into the room. Only if we don't put the kids to bed, I joked back, half expecting a playful slap on the cheek. Well, they're both sound asleep, so we can too, Carol replied, to my surprise, and quickly took Tim from me. Picking Mary up in my arms, I followed her into the spare bedroom that Carol and I shared with two small children, and we tucked them in for the night, kissing both babies goodnight. You're not kissing me goodnight, Mike, Carol teased me when we got back downstairs. She often teased me that way, and I responded with something equally silly. Am I ugly or something, Mike? Asked Carol after looking at me for a few moments. Of course not, Carol, I replied cautiously. You're very attractive. Are you gay or something? She continued, grinning from ear to ear. I don't think so. Well, I wasn't. So you like me, then? Of course you would, Carol, I muttered, realizing I was on dangerous ground. Any man would, but there's also the age issue. 12 years old? Asked Carol. 12 years is a problem? Carol, I tried to explain. You're already young enough to be my daughter. That wasn't true,
and Carol looked at me perplexed.
So, Carol broke the silence, rising from her chair.
If in your eyes I'm just a child, then my undressing won't bother you, will it?
I swallowed hard as she started to undo the buttons on her blouse, my voice failing me at first when I tried to ask her to stop.
Carol, you don't have to, I finally muttered.
Then tell me to stop, Mike, and I promise you I'll never try that damn trick again.
I'd be too embarrassed. Oh, my God. Numb with horror, I watched as the blouse was discarded, then the skirt. Carol twisted around a bit, then unhooked her bra and tossed it aside.
My God, her firm little breasts and gorgeous long hard nipples were incredibly pleasing to look at, and I don't need to describe the effect it had on me.
So, Mike? She challenged me. Should I stop or go all the way? Rumble.
The words weren't coming, so I just nodded, which seemed to work on her, and soon her tiny panties joined the small pile of clothes spread out around her.
Do you want me to take off my high heel shoes, or are you feeling a little perverted with this girl? She demanded, a smirk lighting up her entire face.
Come here, sweetheart, I commanded her, and within seconds she was already curled up in my arms, the same place her son had just been, but with a completely different outcome.
12 years?
No problem, and although she was younger than me, Carol was as tired as I was when the playful cries of the children woke us up in the morning.
Your turn or mine? A beautiful young woman asked sleepily, snuggling up to me.
I'll go and tuck them in this morning if you don't move before I get back, I offered. A wonderful lover, Carol whispered hoarsely, smirking. It's your turn this morning, and tomorrow it's mine.
Tomorrow? And the next day, and the next. Life is suddenly pretty damn good again, believe me.
In fact, it turned out to be even better than darn good, because Carol and I were so right for each other. 6 months later, despite my earlier decision to leave everything to Janet, I filed for divorce, and Carol and I were married immediately thereafter. I officially adopted Tim as my son, and Carol, with Janet's blessing, yes, she was still around, adopted Mary.
In fact, Janet visited Mary regularly and got along well with Carol.
She even began to take both children with her when she took Mary anywhere. I made it clear, however, that I would not welcome the presence of Janet's mother around her, but Janet didn't seem to see much of her anyway.
And Nick, the soccer player? Never dated this guy and never wanted to.
I know he refused to marry Janet, but as far as I knew he had never been unfaithful to her. But there was also no doubt that my ex-wife's relationship with her new man was not working out the way she had hoped, and the strained relationship with her parents wasn't helping matters either.
I felt sorry for her. Can you imagine that?
I think if you love a woman the way I loved Janet, it doesn't end suddenly. Feelings can wax and wane and eventually fade, but they still remain and tend to rekindle, sometimes at the most inopportune moment. For me, it was about 3 years of marriage to Carol. Nick quit Stockport, and at his age he would struggle to find another decent team.
Then his attempts to get into management failed.
I guess times were tough for them and Janet needed a shoulder to cry on. I don't know how you could be so good to me, Mike, Janet cried.
After what I did to you.
It's okay, Janet, I replied, hugging her to reassure her.
It worked out in the end.
But I miss you, Mike, she whimpered.
After everything that happened between us, I still miss you.
I miss you, honey, I said for some reason and kissed her forehead comfortingly. I don't know how it happened, but that little kiss turned into a kiss on the lips, and before we knew it, we were kissing each other fiercely, and all the passion of our previous relationship came to the forefront again. I don't know who started it, but the next moment we were
touching and stroking one another. What are we doing for Christ, Mike? Janet's shout made me flinch.
We can't do that, Mike, she added, looking down at me. But Janet, I begged, almost out of control.
Just this one time, honey. Please, just this one time. No. Mike, no. She yelled loudly, trying to push me away. This is how I ruined my marriage to you, Mike. I won't let it happen again. But Janet, I protested again. Hey guys. If you've been there, you'll understand. If you've never been there, why the hell are you reading this story? No, Mike, no. I can't let you do to Carol what I did to you. I can't. I found my sexual frenzy fluctuating and then going down. Her words hit me hard. Please, Mike, get up, get off me, honey. Think about Carol and the kids, Mike. We can't do this to them, we really can't. Oh, my God. What the hell did I do? We both looked at each other, then I slowly got up off of her. In silence, we both pulled out our clothes and got dressed. I'm so sorry, Mike, Janet sobbed. I just couldn't let you make the same mistake I did. You don't need to apologize, Janet, I told her, my heart pounding. I shouldn't have taken advantage of you. But you're not Mike, not you. But you still have feelings for me, don't you? I nodded my head, agreeing with her but not wanting to risk words. But you love Carol too, don't you? Yes, Janet, I replied. I'm so damn confused. I don't know what to do. I know exactly how you feel, Mike. You have to do what I would do if I were in the same position, Janet admonished me. It can be heartbreaking to love two people at the same time, Mike, but you have to choose your wife over me. We found ourselves in each other's arms again, but this time the mood was different, we were both seeking comfort from each other. I'd better go, honey, Janet finally said and, breaking away from me, gathered her things and slowly headed for the door. Carol will be home soon, she added. Don't say anything about it and treat her tonight. Thanks, Janet, I said sadly. And you go back to Nick. It sounds like he needs you. I will, Mike, Janet replied with more sadness in her voice. He's a really good man. He deserves your love, Janet, I told her, and all the hatred that had built up inside me seemed to melt away. I'm older and wiser now, Mike, Janet whispered, once again finding herself on the verge of tears. I think there's only one man I've ever truly loved, and it's not. At these words Janet burst into tears and ran out the door, leaving me alone with this last thought. If only? But on the other hand, I knew I was as much in love with Carol as I was with Janet. I wish my ex-wife had realized the same thing a few years ago, and perhaps for the first time I appreciated the turmoil she was going through then. So that's the end of my little story, although it is by no means the end of my life. 6 years later I am still happily married to Carol, my wife, and I have such wonderful children. Yes, Tim and Mary and little Freddie and Linda are a joy to both of us. Janet is the mother of God of the latter two, born on the same day a couple years ago. Yes, twins, which pleased Tim and Mary immensely, for they had been telling everyone all their childhood that they were just that, even though they knew it wasn't quite right. What about Nick? He eventually found a decent job at a sports center, where he is apparently quite happy and taking good care of Janet. Good luck to him. I don't wish him harm, although we still have never met and I have no great desire to date. One final note. 3 years ago I was very well promoted and we had to move to the other side of Manchester. We bought a beautiful 4-bedroom Victorian house in Chapel Heaton, which, as those who live in the area know, is actually... well, I hate to admit it, but it is. Oh, bloody hell, okay then it's bloody Stockport. And hello. It's a very nice friendly place. I love it. I even take young Tim to a Stockport County game on Saturdays, unless Arsenal are playing somewhere in the northwest, but I beg you please don't tell anyone.